Okay, so I guess not everyone knows who I am. We're just meeting each other for the first time. So Christopher Fusco, I'm the broker owner of Keller Williams Empowered. I also am the co-owner of our real estate team, Avenue Realty, which I run with Emma, my mom. Okay, so I am still very much in production, so that everyone kind of gets a grasp on it. So the goal is that I'd probably be 30% production and then 70% with the brokerage. I don't ever want to be in a situation where I'm standing up here kind of coaching people. And the last time I helped someone sign a listing or sign a buyer agency was 15 years ago. So I'll continue to be active in the market so that when we're up here, what we're talking about is relevant and I'm experiencing it like you. Last night, I was up past midnight working on multiple offers, lots of fun. So I kind of know where everyone's coming from and what we're doing and feel the paces of the market as well. So I also feel like what we're going over today, which is going to be talking about how to use email to create an effective marketing machine. I go through this struggle as too, coming up with content, how to structure it, how to make it simple, how to have impact on the people who are receiving it. Okay. So what we're predominantly dealing with, and just so, because not everyone was with us last time, this is the second part of a series, and we'll probably be between 3 to 4 total in terms of the number of series we go to get through the entire course content. But what we're going over is like our email communication that we send out to people. I think we know this, like we all receive a ton of emails, okay? For those senders, we're probably deleting a good number of what comes into us. Yet there's some that maybe catch our attention. So what we're trying to address is sort of this issue is that we're sending out emails to our database, to different consumers, and we're not necessarily getting the result we want. And that result can be defined in a couple different ways. One of those ways is from a consideration of engagement. So these are people who are in our world, they're very much aware of who we are, maybe we have a relationship with them already in terms of client engagement previously. But it doesn't, result in people reading the emails or reaching out to us for content from the emails or really keeping us there more engaged, okay? Or then even just sending out the emails to maybe people who we don't already have a relationship with, and the emails aren't providing enough interest that they have a desire to develop a relationship with us. So if we think about sending out those emails and people who might be receiving it, I want to really engage those people who are already part of my world and remind them why I can provide them value, okay? And then for those people who are maybe just a little bit more peripheral to my world and on the exterior, someone who maybe responded to a Facebook ad or someone who came into an open house and they've given us permission to send them information. I want the emails to be engaging enough that they now want to come into my world on a more active basis. Okay, they want to understand the value that I bring. They want to communicate with me. They want to view me as their source for real estate. Okay, and when we chat about these emails, I just want to go over the backdrop of kind of what our objective is when we're communicating out. Okay, and I'll go over the backdrop. On listings, what we know is that 76% of sellers will interview one realtor. Okay, that's it, one realtor. And then for buyers, 58% of buyers will interview one realtor. In both instances, if there's an interview of 2 realtors, both the percentages go well above 80%. Okay, so when we think about sending out emails and remaining present in people's mind or capturing them being resources, what we're doing with these emails is we're really fighting for mind share. So we're fighting for the ability that when they think of realtor, because they know many, many realtors, there's no question about that when they think of realtor, they think of your name. So how do we structure our communication that we're so engaging that we capture that mind share? Okay. The solution to this, because we know everyone's inundated with emails, okay, is that we want to basically create some simple topic buckets that we're going to use. Okay, and then that's what we're going to use to engage our clients and consumers on a consistent basis. Right? And you have to catch me. I'm trying to get customers out of my language these days because of Tressa. Okay, But that's our goal. We're going to use these topic buckets, and that's how we're going to use them to engage our clients and our consumers. Okay. The topic buckets that we're going to utilize, and we're going to be walking through, and we went through one of the buckets on the first session. We will make it through the second bucket today, and hopefully we'll be able to get through the third and the fourth in one combined series next time. But part of the buckets is to make it easy for us to compile communication, and we're going to go over that. So the goal is that we want powerful marketing that actually builds a marketing machine. So as you'll see when we go through this, and I will recap the first bucket that we reviewed last session, so we have a high level of it together. And if we do have extra time today, I can open up that presentation for any of you who weren't here, and we can get into the details of the first bucket too. But what we're trying to do is not just create an email campaign, but we're trying to use basically our email as a very consistent way to create material that can then also be leveraged to the other medias that we utilize to reach out to our realtors, our clients, okay? So if you think of your job as a realtor and you think of all the different ways that you can communicate, what are some of the different ways that you communicate with your clients? You call them, sure. How else, like we think more marketing based, how else do you do that? We've got social media, right? So now we get into social media. It's Facebook, it's Instagram, it's all sorts of different, venues that you can post on, right? You've also got your website where you can have a blog, you can have different pages on the website. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to create this one spot that you get to focus on, which we really simplify the methods to which you can think about and come up with content that you can then put your information in there that will create these engaging emails. But then all that information can then be leveraged and then repeated on the different mediums that you choose to utilize to communicate with your clients and your customers. So it's not just about email marketing, it's really just about general, how are we going to grab everyone's attention? And then by doing so, we create material that can be utilized on all the other different channels that we have. Okay. So when we start with email though, and email's the base that we're going to focus on. And the reason why I like it is I don't like social media. I get, kind of anxious about the idea of I've got to produce 3 videos a week, and I've got to be on camera even. Okay. So there's, email something I can handle. Okay. And the way that we can present the emails, it's like this one box, and then I can then take the material from there and someone else can distribute it to all the other different spots. They can get it up on the blog, they can post it on Instagram, but I can manage just psychologically for me, communicating through the email and having really valuable contact in that one spot. And then someone else can take it and distribute. Okay. So when we talk about emails though, in terms of that one spot to utilize, okay, is that it allows us to create this buffet of information. And so for those of you who were here at the first series, this is a bit of a repeat because I want to go over the baseline, okay, is it creates this buffet of information. This is where we're going to have the buckets in different topic groups, all right? Because as we could imagine, if I sent out an email to all of you currently sitting in the room, and I had a buffet there, or imagine we go to a restaurant together, okay? Now we're talking, okay? Everyone's like, okay, restaurant, let's talk about this, right? So we went to a restaurant and there was a giant buffet there. Will we all go to the exact same spot? No, right? So, and what's interesting too is we might go to different spots at different times too, like us personally, right? So, if I show up at the buffet and it's a big breakfast buffet and I'm in a big health kick, right? I'm probably, with a lot of willpower walking past that bacon, okay? If I'm going to the buffet at a certain point in time and either I'm feeling extremely healthy or I know I need to, or I'm just like, forget it, I don't care, I'm going straight to the bacon. I'm going to the waffles, I'm putting caramel, like the buffet is there. So each of us get to choose how we want to handle that buffet. Are we doing nothing but eggs, no carbs? Like we can choose what's there. So we're going to create an email campaign, okay? We can use email like a buffet. So what's on that email will be attractive to one person at certain points on the email and completely irrelevant to, say, the person behind you who's, absorbing the call, the email as well. And what's even more interesting, hey, how are you? Is that at different times when you get this email, there may be a portion of the buffet that you prefer at one point in time versus another portion of the buffet that you prefer at an alternate point in time. Because it'll all depend on your lens and where you're coming from. So the goal and the objective is to create a very easy to digest buffet in this email that will allow people to come in and take what they want and go to a more in-depth place from an information perspective. Okay, so the email is really the appetizer itself. All right, and we kind of chatted about this before. Right now, the structure of my monthly, email, I'm very much, for those of you who don't know me, very much of like a stats type person. I'll win over clients with information and approach and kind of details. That's just, it's me and who I am. Okay, so, and there's a fundamental flaw with the way I've been doing my email marketing. So I have all that information there, but it's a lot. So I start with a paragraph, I'm giving people information. I'm usually using graphs and things that I've got from, Census Canada, and then your typical little graph that shows you sales up, down, sideways. There's a lot of information there. Instead, what we want to do is we just want to make it like a bit of an appetizer. One graphic that will then be able to be clicked on, and people will then go to where the in-depth analysis will be. Because the challenge with having that in-depth analysis up front, there'll be some people who love it and read it, and that's what they come to me for. I've been really happy. I've gotten some responses to our emails saying that, look, I get so many of these, but I wait for yours because I find the insight there is better than most. Okay. But for those people who aren't into the numbers the way I'm into the numbers, and they're into the new listings, okay, more so, I'm forcing them to scroll down substantially before they get to that range. Okay. So what we want to do is we want to create these topic buckets that will be there, easy to digest, easy to access, and they're like appetizers, where when people click on them, they'll be brought to the full meal. The other reason why email can be really nice is because it is basically free. So when we think about using your CRM, okay, so for some of you in the room who are already part of our organization, I'll just use our platform as an example. So Command as a platform is what we utilize as part of our CRM. And we have a fairly high number of free emails that you get to send out every month. Like you really have to push to go past the boundary of the free email. Okay. So, and even then though, if you're using, methods like Constant Contact or MailChimp, the cost per email compared to the cost of, say, sending out postcards is substantially lower, like substantially lower. Okay. And the other dynamic about it, let's say we take a postcard as an example. So if I send postcards and it comes to every one of your residences, okay, and you look at that and it impresses you, and your uncle or your aunt or your family member is interested in selling, it's unlikely that you're going to save that postcard, and then when it comes time for Sunday dinner and you're getting together, you're going to bring that postcard over to Sunday dinner and give it to your uncle, your aunt, your brother, your sister, whatever the case is. If you know that your brother, sister, aunt, or uncle is interested in selling, you get our email and you think it's really, really impressive, it is extremely easy for you to forward that over to them when you know they're thinking of buying or selling real estate, and you think that we might be a good match for them. So it's easy to get scale and to then be able to put in front of people who aren't even currently in your database and then have them engage you. The other dynamics that we think about is the insights that they provide to us. And so when I talk about insights that they provide to us, what we're really talking about is the information that we can learn from the emails that are sent. So, and look, I send postcards as well. I geofarm certain areas, we do as a team, and we send the postcards out on a consistent basis. So I'm not saying this is a bad, postcards are a horrible thing to do, you should never do them. I'm just looking at the difference in terms of what we can get from postcards versus emails. When I send postcards out, I've got no idea how many people have picked them up, how many people are reading them. We have no idea about that, right? When we send out an email campaign, we can track our results. We can see how many people received the email. We can see how many people have opened the email. We can see how many people click through. Right? So if you're going through that process and you can see that, you can even pull up a list. Well, who clicked through? Right? So if you think about, a big item of discussion for us is to be consistently lead generating and calling into your database. So let's think about the day after you send out your email. If you can see your market stats, your stats of who's been opening your emails and who's been clicking through, we can have a priority list of who we should be calling. When we send out the postcards and it goes into the neighborhood, we don't know who we're engaging or we're not engaging. We're waiting for them to reach out and come back to us. Same thing really when we kind of like post and whatnot, we're not necessarily sure who's watching it. We can't engage them or easily collect the information to engage them at a later point in time. Okay. So we have these optics, which optics we can change our behavior, we can engage, we can prioritize. Email gives us the opportunity to have optics, whereas other methods, which you will use because you'll leverage what we do in our emails to spread them out, okay, don't necessarily give you those optics. The other thing is you're not necessarily relying on an algorithm with your emails. It goes into someone's inbox, and if you've done your email at a high level, they will access and utilize the email and the content from the email. When we think about utilizing things like Facebook and Instagram, a lot of it comes down to algorithms. We talked about it earlier. If you want to have presence on something like Instagram, how many videos are you posting on a consistent basis? Even when we think about search engine optimizing your website, a lot of the discussion becomes, well, what's the content like? How's that going to look? What algorithm is Google looking for right now to increase your ranking based on different searches? Emails don't have that challenge or that opportunity, depending on how you're looking at it, with respect to getting people's attention. Right? You're simply sending it in, and if the email does its job, you should be capturing it. So now let's go over the buckets, just at a high level, right? So what we're going to talk about, and just before I get going, by the way, I didn't make all this up. I took a course in the fall. It was a fantastic lady named Mary Cheatham King and her real estate team. And it was about a 7 or 8 week course. And so I'm packaging that together for everybody here so that we can utilize it to grow our businesses. Okay. But she's truly phenomenal. She runs an amazing business. And when we talk about, the reason I want to bring this up is because everyone has different approaches. She emails weekly. And she didn't always email weekly. She said, I had to start monthly because as an organization, just coming up with the content and doing it effectively, okay, it took time to build the muscle to be able to make it easy to then do it weekly. But because they then got in a rhythm and they developed habits around creating the email, she's sending hers out weekly. And it's an interesting one to talk about because today we're going to be going over the market update one, which for us, most of the time, we think of that as a monthly thing. And like, how could you do it more frequently than that? But as you'll see, when we go through all the different ways we can do the market update, okay, you'll really quickly see that, oh no, you could probably do this weekly if you're fairly active. Okay? So here's our 4 buckets that we talk about. And it's listings is your first bucket. And I'm going to go over this, doing a bit of a recap for us today, because there's a lot of new faces in the room who weren't with us when we did the first part of this series. Then we go into a market update bucket, followed by a community bucket, and then a team or a personal bucket. So I want you to imagine your email, okay? And I've had the benefit of obviously seeing how this is executed. Each of these buckets will be represented by a graphic on your email. So you basically have just as simple as this, 4 different graphics following this formula. Okay, so first would be your listing bucket, second will be your market update bucket, followed by your community bucket, and finally your team and personal bucket. So the email with all the content that you reduce, remember this is the appetizer of the buffet. So the buffet are these different buckets, and they're only appetizers because for each bucket, you will be able to click on them and be brought elsewhere to where you will find additional information. So once you figure out which bucket attracts you, you click on it and you get to go out for dinner. Make sense? So just going over very briefly our buckets, okay, this is the system we're creating. So this system isn't just for the people who are going to be consuming it, your consumers and your clients. This system is also for you. We talked about going from first monthly, maybe to bi-weekly, and then to weekly. These buckets are also making it easier for you to be able to prepare content to deliver to your clients and your consumers. So the content creation allows you to create consistency in your communication out to the people who are receiving your emails. Okay? It's a system that provides clarity for the readers. So imagine they're getting this email on a consistent basis. They are going to know what's at the buffet, and based on what they're hungry for, they will go to that particular appetizer, click through, and away they will go. But you're basically going to be creating expectations as to what your email has by having that consistency of the 4 buckets. Okay, so the other thing that it does is it's going to save brain calories, and it essentially talks about brain calories for the reader, but I'm also going to say it's going to save brain calories for you, right? So in the dynamic of having an email that just has all the information in the one spot. So you think about the buckets, you've got more than just the appetizer, you've got the full meal. Imagine having an email that was just broken into 4 sections with all these buckets, but it was the full content there. To get from one bucket to the next, if you really want to just see what's going on with the team or the personal, you're forcing someone to really scroll through all those prior 3 buckets, the listing, the market update, and the community bucket. So you're making it hard for them to get to the bucket that means the most to them at that point in time. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to basically save them brain calories to get to the information that has the most value for them at that point in time. I also think it saves a tremendous amount of brain calories for yourself. Okay? Because when it comes to putting together the email, you're no longer thinking, what am I going to do? What is this going to be structured like? All you're thinking of, what do I take today and put into the listing bucket? What do I take today and put into the market update bucket? The series that we're going through is taking a deep dive into each of these buckets and determining the different options you have for each bucket. So as you'll see when we go over the listing at a high level, we had 15 different types of content to put in your listing bucket. That doesn't mean you have to use all 15 different types, but you'll probably be very familiar with certain types of listing buckets or content for that bucket that is easy for you to do. And so you're not going to consistently be thinking about, how do I present this? What do I do? What'll end up happening is, as you go through your day-to-day, and say you're going through something, you're thinking of the marketing bucket, okay, you'll think of the different options you have for your marketing bucket, and all of a sudden, as you're encountering information, it'll pop out at you and say, oh, I can make that my marketing bucket for this month, or this week, or this edition, whatever it's going to look like. Okay, so we avoid having to think too hard about what it looks like to gather information and put it inside. Have any of you ever encountered that? You're trying to put your email together, and a lot of the time is spent is, how do I structure it? What does it look like? What content goes inside? So the buckets are easy. You don't have to think. You go to the bucket, you choose a content, and then away you go. You're not having to reinvent the wheel every single time you send out an email. It's a simple formula. Okay? So it's a snippet of information that goes into the bucket. What's important, though, is that each individual bucket that you have will have a call to action. So when we think about our listing bucket, our market update, our community, and then our team and personal, each and every single bucket has a call to action. Something that you're trying to engage, that they're going to reach out to you to have further conversation and continue to build a relationship with them. Okay? The reader can click, and they can do their deep dive. We discussed that. This is the appetizer. They click on it, they go and have their dinner. To wherever you have the information. So when we look at the formula overall, it's going to be like this. Okay, you're going to start with your header. We're going to go over the header and the footer, and we're going to go over a high level the listing bucket, because that was our first series. But you start with your header, and then you're going to flow through listing bucket, market update, community, personal team bucket. Then we call it the secret sauce, and then your sign off. Okay, so you go through this. This is going to be the order you present things. And we're going to talk about why the order we present things is important. Okay. all going to be online for you. Recording plus the PowerPoint.
Oh.
Yeah, for everyone, so just I see some of the people who are new to our organization. If you're part of Keller Williams Empowered already, we have the vault. The video of this session will be there, just like the video of the last session is there, as well as the PowerPoint. So you don't have to get my head in photos and too many drills than we need. Sharon, if you could help with some chairs, that'd be great. There is a seat for you up front, though. You can come on up. Andy, if you don't mind, your bag. Okay, so this is the order that we're going to go through things. Okay, and right now what we're doing is we're making our way through, and we're going to spend most of our time on the market update bucket today. I will do a bit of a cleanup of the header and the listing bucket and the sign off. The header and the sign off are done together. Okay, so let's just go over the header and the sign off as a reminder. There's a seat right up here if you're interested. I don't bite, I swear. So the lucky spot. So it's got to be the same in every single email that you send. Okay, so when you send out your email, this is the one thing that's going to have consistency. There will be consistency to the flow and the style of each of your additional buckets that you're going to have within the email. But I want your header and your footer to be the same every time. This is your brand. Okay, so when they see this, they're going to know what they get inside from a value perspective. It may be presented a little bit differently, but we want them to be very comfortable knowing what it looks like. Okay, you can do this in multiple different ways. It could be easier in emails, simply the way you have your subject line and everything. But this is what we want to see. It's going to be as simple as this. Your header ingredients will have your logo, your slogan, your website, and a link to your website. So everything should be clickable back to your website. Right? I think when we go through the listing presentation conversation, we've seen many times before that year in and year out, 81 to 82% of our buyers usually find their properties online. Okay. What's interesting about that is usually Realtor.ca is only representing anywhere from 28% to 33% of where they find it. So that means you've got roughly 50% of people finding their properties online that isn't Realtor.ca. So when we have our logo and we have our slogan, we want everyone back to our website where we have additional properties for them to peruse. Our website is our hub where we get control and we have the ability to show them our values, our systems, our products, who we stand for. So we want to get them back there because that we have control of. The footer is going to have a general call to action, a salutation, and your name. So imagine they're going to go through the buckets. And remember, our buckets are now appetizers. They're clean, they're concise. So getting from the top of the email to the bottom of the email isn't the same journey as having the full meal for each of the sections in that email. Okay. So when we get to the bottom, we have to make sure we have that call to action. Right. So your call to action's at the bottom. It's not necessarily at the top. Right? So at the top, again, we're going to have our logo, our slogan, our website, link to your website. So you click on it and you go straight to your website. By the bottom of the email, we have a call to action. Now, remember, though, each bucket that's in between is going to have its own individual call to action as well. So it's not as though we're going from all the way at the top of the email to the bottom of the email with a call to action, which is often the case of how most of us produce our marketing today. We maybe have a logo at the top, might be clickable, might not be clickable to your website. And then the call to action is all the way at the bottom. So I want you to keep the call to action at the bottom, but for each bucket that we have, we're going to continue to have a call to action in there. So if you think about perusing this appetizer, this buffet of appetizers, the entire way through, you're getting a call to action, call to action, call to action, call to action, and then a final one at the bottom. So this is just the formula that we want to have for our basically our header and our footer. Okay, sounds good. We're ready to party. That's all right. So we're going to do a quick recap of the listing bucket. Okay, so I mean we spent an hour and a half to 2 hours on the listing bucket the last time we went over this. So this will be a quicker recap of the listing bucket. But I do want to go over it because it creates some context for those of you who weren't with us previously. So the listing bucket is always going to be your first bucket. All right. And we want it to be the first bucket, and we want to make sure it hooks them. I'd say, especially in the Greater Toronto area, housing, clients, they're on looking at houses like it's an addiction. Okay. So you want to put that addiction, that opportunity to hook, right at the very top. Okay. Now, here's the key about the formatting. This is where you have to work with someone who's going to help prepare the formatting for you. They need to be able to see that listing bucket before they have to scroll. Now, you have to give yourself a little bit of forgiveness on this because, you know, my wife's phone folds out and looks like a computer screen. So, you know, she would essentially probably be able to see 2 or 3 buckets on an immediate basis. So there's going to be some technology differences between, you know, what you can see when someone opens up a screen, even just your computer screen at your desk. Larger versus smaller will impact what they see. But we want to make sure that on the majority of what you're sending out and devices that people might open it up on, that listing bucket can be seen. And so what we mean by seen is that we don't want to have to scroll at all. So we talked about having the header, okay? We've got our slogan, it's clickable to our website, but we don't want that to be the only thing they see. Because if that's the only thing they see, they already know the email is coming from you. We want them to see something that might interest them. Because housing is such an interesting topic, most people are searching for listings when they can't sleep. And then when you help them buy a property, a home, they keep looking over and over again, which is detrimental for their health, of course. Okay. That listing bucket is the best thing to have at the top, and we want them to be able to see the full listing bucket when they open the email. Okay. So it can provide value to even those who aren't transacting. Okay. Think of a piece of your portfolio for future for sellers. Okay. And we're going to go over this a lot. Right. So if I have a listing, I'm going to send you the email, and the first thing you see is the listing bucket. What am I doing with you right then and there? You have no interest in selling your home right now. But what is that though? If you're seeing how I present a home, what's happening between us? What am I showing you? Different value. Different value. In particular, okay, I'm showing you how I present a home, right? Call it a property, because that's what I want us to use, the word I want us to use when we talk to our sellers. If I'm showing you how I present a property, and one day you may eventually sell your property, and I consistently show you how I present properties, I'm auditioning for the role of your realtor when you are ready to sell. So it's not necessarily for buyers to look at and I'm going to click on that property because I want to buy the property, which yes, that may occur, and that's a fantastic opportunity for you. But I'd say more often than not, these emails, you know, we all talk about wanting to have a listing-based business. Okay. These emails are opportunities for you to build relationships and audition with sellers. So even if someone's not thinking of transacting, that listing bucket is an opportunity for you to show off how it is you present listings so that someone looks at that and says, when I list, I want this person to present our property. Okay. So you want to use your bullet points as much as possible here. And this is key. My daughter and I were joking. We both have, it's genetic, run-on sentences. Okay. I remember as a child, I would get things back and I would just have a paragraph and it was one sentence. We can be wordy. We can have a lot of things that we want to say, right? But when we're wordy and we have a lot of things that we want to say, are we making it easier or harder for people to get the information we want to give to them? Harder, right? It's harder. Right? Our goal, okay, my background is consultancy, and in my prior employer used to tell me that our goal as consultants is just to take out the diamonds from the rough. If you think about what a consultant does, they gather all the information that already exists in an organization, and they do some analysis on it, but really they're just restructuring and presenting information that that organization already had for the most part, the majority of what they're doing. Right? Bullet points allows you to just extract what the diamonds in the rough are and present them in a digestible way so it's not hard for your consumer and your client to see those diamonds. Okay. So we want to use the bullet points as much as possible. The goal is to get the reader to your website. Right? So the way we present properties on our website, there's the video, there's a 3D walking tour, there's the floor plans, there's these tabs that talk about different dynamics of the property. The main floor, we talk about how wide plank the flooring is. It gets very detailed. So I've got a new listing that I'm doing. I don't want to have that all there in front of them, because if someone's not really interested in that, I've lost them, because they can't get to the next bucket quick enough. But we want to get them to the website. We don't want to send them to social media at this point in time if we can avoid it. What happens when you click and go onto your social media? When I ask this question, I'm asking you because I do not go on social media at all. So when you go on I see my wife do it a lot. So what happens though when you go on social media? What happens when you go there?
You get distracted
You get distracted, right? It's perfect. Ads pop up, different things are showing. I ask my wife all the time on Instagram, like, is that a friend of yours? It's not a friend of mine, it's just some random people that I follow, right? You see the cute cat video and that's it, you're done. Right? So when you send people to your social media from your email, you stand the potential of losing them. Now, don't get me wrong, we're going to leverage the material and still utilize it on our social media, but ideally we want them going back to our website as much as possible, because that's our arena. That's where we have control of what's there and what's not there. Okay. So you have your property page and your website, and that's where you want to send them. If you don't have a significant number of listings of your own, you can send them to where you've got your IDX. Okay, and you've got the instant feed of listings that come in. Make it easy for them to email you. What we're trying to do here is we're removing any friction for them to email or call you, or easy them from looking into this bucket. I can't tell you how important it is to make your contact information easy to access. We recently had a listing where we had a plethora of people go through an open house. We had, I think, 30 or 40 people on the one day. And through that day, there were several realtors who came in and they showed their clients, but they didn't have booked appointments. My team member who was there collected the cards, took a picture, and sent it to me. One of those cards, it was so challenging for me to see the name and the number, and there was not even an email address on it. Too bad. Yeah, it is too bad. It's too bad for me because I wanted to connect. I managed to get a number, I managed to get a first name. There's no way I could get the last name out of it, and there was no email. So I wasn't even able to email that individual what the offer notification instructions were going to look like, what offer night would be. Make it easy for people to connect with you. And I'm talking about, this was coworker to coworker. But if you think about that business card, now you're a consumer and that's the business card you're given. If they have to hunt to be able to contact you, how easy or how much are they going to want to keep working? You're making them use their brain calories. So let's remove as many of the hurdles as possible. Okay. The call to action is so simple on this one. It's a listing bucket. Click here to learn more about 123 Any Street. It's a very simple call to action on this one. Okay, and you link it directly to the property webpage. Now, just to speak to this, sometimes we as realtors will have landing pages for certain properties, like a property with its own address. Okay, I'm not your website search optimization person. I have been guided though, because we were doing it at one point in time, to stop doing that and bring everyone to your website. Because if they're all going to your website, it'll help increase your search engine optimization, and plus it then puts them in your web. So if you have a property page that's done specifically, and some of our multimedia support or photographers do this, they make a designated website for your property, obviously. Don't link them to that, link them to the version of the property on your website so they can explore more about you and explore more about other properties that you may have listed, or just start searching for properties through your IDX feed. Okay. So the menu, and so this is what we talk about the menu, right? So the initial presentation of the listing on your email is just the appetizer. Here's the version of the different appetizers you can do that people will then click into to find the property. So this is what we went over last week, where we went through 15 different versions of presenting a listing bucket. Okay. And we went through each one step by step, and that's what we're going to do today for the market update bucket. What it looked like was this. Okay, so what you see here are the individual graphics, the different ways of illustrating your listing. Right? So again, you don't have to adopt 15 different versions, but if we think about putting an email together and you've got somewhere between 3 to 5 of these that you're super comfortable with, as you go and you see listings, you're going to automatically like just earmark it as which bucket you'll use to put into your newsletter. So automatically it happens. So if you have a listing, okay, that's in a great location, right? So let's use Mill Pond as a particular location because that's an easy one for all of us to understand. We've got a great school district there. So you could be talking about, you know, St. Teresa's, you could be talking about Pleasantville, you could have a Center for Performing Arts, you could show where Yonge Street is. Right away, I'd be thinking of using the map illustration for that bucket. So the first thing people would see is map, property here, and all the other things that go around it. Now, if you have another one that really has like an amazing lifestyle, or it's very close to, you know, a lot of different things in your community, you could have a local business collection. What's the business that's closest to it that's really cool and amazing? So now maybe let's move a little bit down in Yonge Street, or we go up to Aurora or Main Street, Newmarket. How close are you to some of the restaurants? Right? So you have these different things that you can use, and one's just a simple video walkthrough. So not the video that your photographer produces for you, but you doing a simple video. There's a higher percentage of people that will actually click through when they see a face that starts a video as opposed to just like the home. So starting like this and they see your face that you're about to talk to the home, and you spend 30 seconds to 45 seconds max doing a walkthrough of the home and highlighting it, that's an easy one that I can fathom doing. And that then, of course, can be leveraged to your other social media platforms. Right? Another really easy one, if you have a room that's like really spectacular in a property they have, I can't remember where it is in here, but a room highlight one, where you say have a picture of the room and imagine it's double level ceiling height, big windows, maybe there's a lot of built-ins, open concept, but you could put that in there and you'll have a picture of the room, and then you'll have little tags highlighting the features of the room. So you can go through what all 15 of these are, and what happens is as you start going through your properties and your listings, instantly you're going to start recognizing how you can use it for a listing bucket. So you don't have to start thinking every time about how you're going to present them on a consistent basis, because you'll be familiar with these. I'll be happy to double back to the listing bucket. We can even open up the prior presentation, okay, if we have time today, and we can dig into those, because a lot of you are new to the room. But not everyone is, so I do want to keep going forward and not be repeating it too much. Okay, so let's start with this. It's the market update bucket. So this is a fun one for me. I like it. Okay. With respect to the market update bucket, okay, you have to be careful not to go too deep, or at least I do. Right now, our emails is the way it was starting. I had buckets in it, but my market update was like this big. Okay. And interestingly enough, the listings was all the way at the bottom with some quick graphics. Okay. So remember what we're doing here is this. So before we talked about, you're going to audition to be the listing realtor. That's what you're doing with the listing bucket, right? So your market update bucket is you're auditioning for the role of their personal real estate advisor. So we've heard this term before. Can you be the economist of choice around real estate for your clients and your consumers? Make no mistake, each and every one of us right now has people that are in your database, is in her database, and in my database. There's crossover. We're fighting for that mind share. So this bucket here in particular is about what do we do to differentiate ourselves so that we become the economist of choice. And when they want to know about real estate, they think your name and they give you a call. So that's the purpose of this bucket. So the listing bucket is an audition to be the listing sales rep, because they like the way you present the home on a consistent basis, the property on a consistent basis. And here this bucket is, this is the person I want to call when I want to know about the real estate market. Okay. So here's some best practices before we get into the actual tools that the bucket can be. Okay. So first, it's keep it simple. Don't make the bucket complicated. Right? There's going to be people who love to dig in, they're going to be actuarial in nature, and they're going to be want to really understand the numbers, but your bucket itself needs to be simple. Because remember, you're trying to appeal to a spectrum of individuals who maybe like data versus don't like data, but they still want to know what's going on in the market. So we're going to keep it simple. For the most part, keep it local. Okay. As you'll see when we go through this, there can be some comparisons to national markets just to help differentiate between what the local market looks like and maybe what the national market looks like. But always bring it back relative to the local market. Okay. Tell people why it matters. We make a false assumption. We are surrounded by, on a consistent basis, real estate. We're reading articles about real estate. We're reading articles, when we get into our how to have the market, how's the market conversation. We're reading articles about GDP. We're reading articles about inflation, interest rates, employment rates. It all means something to us because we're consistently cued into what that means for our business, an interest rate sensitive industry. So when we go over something like this, you have to remember to tell people why this matters to them, because they may not necessarily be drawing the, A squared plus B squared equals C squared. They may not see that formula there. You've got to draw it out for them and let them know. Okay. So do it in a sentence or a blurb and make sure it's relatable for people. Choose a singular stat. Okay, let's just talk, not for everything. So on your blog, on your page where it has everything, you can have lots of information there. But when we talk about the bucket itself, choose a singular stat to focus on, okay, for your market update bucket. And then use it as an opportunity for a demographic explaining why this is a stat that you want them to pay attention to. When we think about the different stats that come out, there's so many different stats that come out on a monthly basis. And really, we can make numbers dance. We can make them do whatever we want them to do. And we can tell whatever story we believe that those numbers can tell. So through one lens, someone can look at a stat and they could tell you a story that's doom and gloom. Through another lens, that same stat with a different perspective could be an opportunity statistic. Depends on your perspective and what you're trying to accomplish. Right? We know this from newspaper articles that are consistently released, right? What's the objective of the newspaper articles that are released? What's their objective? Those headlines. Attention. Eyeballs. Right? So the intention of those articles are eyeballs. So usually the subject or the title of those articles is very, very catchy. So most of the time scary. Okay. When the market's good, the fear is, where's the market going? What's happening? It's unbelievable. It's on fire. When's the bubble going to burst? When the market's not strong, sales are down 46%. Right? We've talked about this before on a consistent basis. When you read through the entire article, somewhere around the 3/4 to 2/3 mark, we start to see things as simple as pragmatic analysis. But the top part is simply for the eyeballs. Okay. So what we want to do is we want to make sure we're doing kind of the same thing, like what is that stat we're using and whose eyeballs are we trying to capture? What story are you telling with that statistic? Now, the next thing that we want to do is we want to take advantage, or when we think about it, of your month ends, your recaps. So like right away, we're in March now. So we can have a first quarter recap coming up in April. Right? So it's a good opportunity to have those recaps in. Again, we want to do bullet points. Same thing that we talked about with the listings. We're going to take the diamonds out of the rough. Okay. And then here's a big thing, and it can be tough. Okay. Just get it done. It does not need to be perfect. And I'm someone who struggles with this a lot. Okay. You want to get your information out. Now, I would say there's a bit of a balance. See a lot of realtors that when the stats come out, it is like a full-on sprint. Because the belief system is that if they get their email out to people 1 minute, 1 hour, half a day before anyone else gets it there, that theirs will be the only thing that is read. I would challenge that and say that it's a combination of getting things out in a timely fashion while it's still relevant, but the quality of what's inside and the desire to want to listen to what your voice has to say about this market analysis plays a factor into whether they will shift delete all the emails they received before yours and then open yours up as well. So I get the concept, speed to lead, Facebook lead generation, you'll get that newsletter out right away. But if the content of your newsletter that lacks substance on the market valuation and no one reads it, doesn't matter how quickly you get it to them, right? Okay. So get it done. It doesn't have to be perfect, but it's got to have content that's valuable for people to read. Don't be rushing through it. Okay. So what we want to do in terms of the process or the formula for this, okay, we're going to go into individual buckets in a second. I'll probably give you a break for a sec so you guys can grab some coffee. But we're going to do your headline and your title. Okay, then we want to hook the reader. So same thing like the newspapers, you still have to hook the reader. Maybe you don't have to be hooking the reader with negativity, which is usually the way that a lot of headlines are grabbing people's attention, but you need to hook the video. Or sorry, hook the reader. Video, chart, visual representation is usually going to be very helpful when we're dealing with market statistics. Brief explanations using your bullet points. It's short and sweet. Don't get too long-winded. You can have your blog on your web page to handle that. Okay? Clear, concise, and again, a call to action. All right? So you always want to lead, with your home evaluation tool and your email address. So this is a market update. Well, people are looking when they're looking for the market update, they're looking for general awareness, okay, or you're the economist of choice. But usually people start looking at the market update when we think about the different appetizers in front of them, our 4 buckets: listings, market update, okay, community, and team/personal. The market update is usually when they're thinking of selling because they want to know, is the market good or not? So what we want to talk about there is, do they need a home evaluation? That'll be your big call to action. Okay. What we're going to do next, we'll take a brief break for it. You guys can grab some coffee if you like. But what we'll do next is we're going to start to go in the different buckets you can create, the different illustrations of your market update bucket. So just like before, where we had 15 different ways that you could illustrate your listing bucket, we're going to go through the different ways you can illustrate your market update bucket. Okay. Sound good? All right. Grab some coffee, everybody. Okay, everybody. Let's get going again, and we'll pick up. So what we're going to do right now is we're going to go into the different ways that we have the ability to present the market update bucket. Okay. The first way that we're going to be leveraging, or what we're going to leverage on a consistent number of them, is what we call the language of real estate. Okay. So our language of real estate is where we're really starting to look at the different numbers that we have on a consistent basis. So this is where we look at multi-year trends. This is where we're using, David, I need you to shift a little bit, please. This is where we are looking at data that we have on MLS. And we also can do things like talk about where you are relative to the market in terms of your activity levels. Okay. When we take a look at the menu, this is where we see things like closed units, closed volumes. We're looking at 2023 versus 2024. These are some of the constant things that we see when we look at the stats that say come out from MarketWatch. All right. So things like days of the market. Okay. So we're going to go through the different things we can use through our language of real estate. So we've got all these different statistics, which is our language of real estate, the numbers that we're so consistently talking about, number of units in February 2024 versus February 2023, average sale prices, average rate of increases. We have all these things. This is our law, language of real estate. So what we're going to do is we're going to break down different ways of bringing the language of real estate to people in a market update bucket. So if we remember, just going backwards a little bit, one of the first things that we talked about when we said our best practice was to keep it simple. Right? You could choose to verbally exhaust all the information that you have on this bucket and put all the information that you think is relative into the one spot. But that wouldn't be keeping it simple. So what we're going to talk about is different ways that that initial bucket can be kept simple to capture people's attention, right? So this is what we'll go through right now when we go over our language of real estate conversation. So the first one that we'll talk about is just a local market general update. What you're seeing here on the right-hand side, when you take a look at it at a later point in time, is on the right-hand side, you're seeing this is what the bucket will look like in the email. Okay, so just to bring us all onto the same page, when we look at here, all these graphics, those are all illustrations of the different ways you can have your listing bucket. So I want you to now just start imagining the email as you scroll through. You'd have a bucket that looks like this as your first bucket under your header. And then after that, right underneath, you're going to have a bucket that's going to look like one of your market update buckets. So on each slide that we go through, it's an illustration of how you can present in a consistent way a different market update bucket. Right? So in this particular one, it's really, really easy. This is like a 2023 versus 2024. This is a very common one. You're using your graphic to tell the story. Right? So if we even just think of number of units, this would be an easy one. February 2024 versus February 2023, our number of units increased substantially. A lot of times what you might see is the actual size of the homes might be different, right? And then you'd have the number of transactions in between. So it's a graphic illustration that's going to tell your story for you. What does it mean to you? So it's one thing. So we think you're going to have some text in here, but what does it mean to you? What does that statistic mean to you? What does it mean in particular to the seller? All right, we want to do and we want to create seller-based businesses. Remember, a seller-based business doesn't mean you ignore buyers. Seller-based business means you're going to have about 60% of your transactional volume come from listings and 40% from the buy side. The people that you sell are hopefully buying, and then from every listing that you get, you will pick up a buyer that you can support to find their property. But in your market update, what you're looking at, and not all of them will be this way, but you're looking at how can you support getting sellers' attentions, okay? And so those are the stats that you might want to show. I think the big thing that people miss is this right here. Like, it's not rocket science. What does it mean for you? You can blatantly write this out there. What does it mean for you? That will grab someone's attention. Me? Okay, now I have to look. What does it mean for me? And write some text there. In this particular instance, okay, what does it mean for you? Now is the time to take advantage of our limited inventory. Strategic marketing plans net our sellers top dollar. So what does it mean? So we know there's not a lot of listings. So the number of listings in our case has switched in our most recent months, but we've had consistent basis where there's not a lot of listings for buyers to choose from. So you can think about if it's directed to a seller, what does it mean for them? It may mean that they can be one of the only people on the market right now with buyers that are still looking and don't have enough product to choose from. Does anyone remember the second week of January to the middle of February? Because that's exactly what was happening. So this is just a general market update one, and use a graphic to illustrate it. So that's one of your market update buckets or illustrations of that bucket. Another one can be the local market versus you. All right. So what's happening in the local market compared to you or your team? So what have you done differently? Are you outpacing the market? Is there a statistic that you have about what you're doing with the sale of the properties that you're supporting that outpaces what's happening in the marketplace? And you could show that illustration. The general market is over here and we're over here. Does that make sense? So let's think of it this way. The general market may have increased, and the number of sales increasing in the general market has been by XYZ percentage. Now let's say that you've been working and you've done a great job of lead generating while the market was low, and you're about to increase your number of transactions. And now you, compared to last year, have increased by a more significant percentage than the number of transactions that the general market is. All of a sudden, people start looking and saying, well, this person's efforts are not, or their results are not just a function of what's happening in the marketplace. They're actually outpacing the market. They're creating more transactions in their own book of business than the marketplace would otherwise just give them naturally. So what can you do around that? Can you look at your days on the market versus the average days on the market in the overall marketplace? When we think about the things that are important to sellers, when we go over kind of listings and what it means to have listings and what's important to sellers, how quickly you can sell the property and how long that process looks is an important item to them. So if you can show them that the average days on the market in the marketplace is, 32 and yours is 19, people right away are going to say, well, what does that mean? Why are they selling their properties quicker than the average on the marketplace? So this is an easy one where you're able to just take a look at what are you doing relative to your local market? Are there differences that are worth highlighting? So this is a second way that you can present a market update. Another one is just simply this. It's your average sale price year-over-year trend. This is going a little bit macro and looking at perspective. I find right now this could be a relatively useful strategy because a lot of times people aren't realizing our average price point right now, where that is relative to, say, the last 5 years, and actually how strong it is. So if you think about yourself communicating to sellers that are inundated a lot lately, okay, called the last 12 to 18 months of articles from the paper that are meant to grab your eyeballs and then tell you, that it's a challenging time to sell, the market has shifted. When you actually take an average price and you run that across a 5-year basis, they're probably going to see a bit of a different story in that illustration and realize that average price is actually still pretty high. Right, so right now in 2024, they're predicting our average price will be the second highest the Toronto Real Estate Board has ever seen. The highest having been accomplished in February 2022. And so when you look at these graphs, it's quite evident we are tracking towards that already. Right, so sharing the average sale price in your area, take it up a notch when you take some people to look and compare it over 5 years. Okay, this one provides some insight for buyers as well. So this is where we might be talking to both sides. You can see the trajectory of what's happening. Has it slowed? Is it picking up? What's really occurring? Okay, sometimes what happens is, especially in the articles that we read, they talk about the change in the growth rate, how much prices are increasing by. So what's happening is the rate of increase of prices has become less aggressive, but prices are still increasing. Now, the articles that come out, they don't really get to, till you get to that 3/4 or 2/3 of the way down the article, realize and get that perspective that prices are still increasing. They're just increasing at a different rate. This is your opportunity to be able to show that. So what we really want to look at in this one is, and I've accidentally been effective at this before, is saying, what does this mean for you if you're a buyer? And what does this mean for you if you're a seller? Provide that perspective for them. When you have that 5-year glance, you can look at trajectories and you can say what it means for people, even if prices are increasing on a consistent basis. Right? So let's just break this down a little bit. What do you think that means for sellers? What are you trying to tell sellers at this point in time? Because that's kind of the easier one to do. Is now a good time to sell? Prices are increasing. Okay. Yeah, it's an okay time to sell, right? So that's kind of the natural one we think about. What might be the narrative for a buyer, though, on that? Because when we hear that prices are increasing, does that sound like a good time to sell? Yeah, sorry. If prices are increasing, does it sound like a good time to buy? If it's getting more expensive to buy?
It still can be a good time to buy.
It's the beginning of the market. If it's the beginning of it, it's a good time to buy.
Yeah.
If it's not, if it's middle of it or peak of it, I don't think so.
Yeah, and it's hard to predict where the peak is, right? But if we take a look, and so you're right. So we got some various answers here. It depends is a really good answer, okay? A common answer will be no, because if it's getting more expensive, well, why would I want to buy? It's like the market's escalating, right? But when you take a look at over a 5-year basis and you see that chart, and you see it's consistently getting more expensive, now ask yourself as a buyer, if I can look at it with relative confidence and know it's going to be more expensive to buy tomorrow than it is to buy today, even though prices are increasing, should I buy today or tomorrow? Today. And so if we step back and we think about the Greater Toronto Area, for the most part, over the last 20 years. Okay, and I guess I'm gifted to have lived through all those as a realtor. I remember 2008, when there was a pause in about October. I also remember what happened in April of 2009, and it jacked up again. But when we look at that chart, does it look like it was more expensive to buy before or today? Today. So the same chart can tell a bit of a different story. One story that's supposed, you're not trying to tell people what to do, you're trying to give them perspective. So this 5-year one, or when you take a look at the stats, not just what your stats are today, but you back it up, helps people make decisions. So yes, you know, this may not be the high sale prices we were seeing in February of 2022, but when we look at it relative to where we were and we see 2021 kind of peaking up and where it was, and we kind of see where we are today, you're looking, well, that's pretty high still. Like remember 2020, that was a crazy, crazy year. Our numbers are higher than that.
Oh, now it's higher.
Yeah. But you see that when you look at your 5-year. So now sellers are like, well, wait a second, I would have sold in 2020 when the numbers sounded like it was crazy. Why am I not selling now? My numbers are higher than that. And as a buyer, you have to look at that and say, okay, wait a second, I know all these interest rate increase came, but it's still getting more expensive for me to buy tomorrow. And the challenge is it's probably increasing at a greater rate than their incomes are and their saving rate. You just want to help people through that process. Okay? This is a great one to allow you to do that. Okay? Now, take a look at your average sale price and look at the different times of the year. I didn't know when's usually the lowest sale price of the year. Does anyone know? Yeah, so it's consistently Christmas time or January, right? The number that, the date that usually sticks with me because it's around my birthday, it's usually between January 12th to 18th. Yeah. Yeah. Everyone's just gone through Christmas. They're not really up and running yet. And then so if you're a seller and you're on the market at that time, you're usually on the market because you need to be on the market. And so can you look at it on a month-over-month basis and show people, you know, when is the best time to buy? When is the best time to sell? What are our monthly trends when we see that? Can we look at Q1 and Q4? What are the highest sale prices? Can you find a pattern? When do people buy in different market segments? So could we look and could we find that luxury markets tend to sell more units at certain times of the year than non-luxury segments? Same thing with condos. Can you put that up there? Can you do anything that's going to grab their attention? But this is where we can compare it from a time of the year perspective. Right? We know our industry is seasonal to an extent. A lot of people don't realize why. When you talk to them about the why and you say, well, you know, the bread and butter of the real estate industry, a lot of it's family residential homes. And then people are moving for the school year, it all of a sudden starts to make sense. But you can also take a look at this and you can get into some pretty in-depth analysis, like when, you know, we had different legislative changes. It completely changed what our seasonal norms were. Can you highlight those? Can you explain why? Can you provide insight? Short and succinct, please. Okay, so that's where you have a nice, easy graphic. And this is a month over month. This is running from January to December on this illustration. And you're kind of showing it. Can you take that and can you overlay a different year? Right? So can we overlay the prior year when we know the interest rate changes were happening? Because we're going to see this. You're going to have the ability to see this from last year to this year when interest rates were going up versus now going down at some point. And we're going to be able to see the difference that happens. So if you overlay one year on top of the other on a month-by-month basis, and then put a pinpoint. So what happened on April 21st of 2017?
No.
It went down. Why did it go down?
12 major rules.
Foreign buyers tax came in. Anyone read it? It did nothing. But it was the foreign buyers tax. Right. So when we're doing a month over month and maybe year over year, and you see the drop on the number of units, can you then just put an arrow, say foreign buyer tax introduction? Right. The stress test. Okay. So when the stress test came into effect that January, that November and December was like nothing I'd ever seen before in November, December, because people's purchasing power was significantly changing. I had a client of my own where we had one self-employed individual and another lady who was on contract. That was the partnership that was there. Their purchasing power was a difference between 1.4 to 780. They could afford the property they lived in January. And before January, they could afford to upsize to a detached. It was significant. We went out and we purchased. Right? But you'll be able to see that on the monthly trend, and then you can maybe augment it to show that, like, this was the legislative change that happened. This explains those numbers. Provide insight. Right? And then, why does it matter to them? How does it make a difference for them? So one of the things that you can do, especially in this, is you can give a video too. This is an easy one to give a video. Like we just talked about it very quickly. That's going to be hard to talk about foreign buyers tax. It's going to be hard to talk about stress tests graphically or even on bullets. But we just did it in less than 60 seconds in a video, and it all made sense. Now, you guys were all nodding because you're familiar with these things, so you have to remember that your audience may not be as familiar, so do keep it very simple, and then provide the detailed analysis after you've caught their attention when they click through to your website. So the other is it could be Canada versus local. Now I'll probably even challenge this a little bit. What might be fun too in a lot of instances for us is it could actually be Vancouver versus Toronto. Right? Where are we seeing different trends? So Canada versus Toronto area can be something that you can do. Vancouver, because we see a consistent movement in the Vancouver market and the Toronto market. Have you ever noticed that Vancouver has higher highs and then lower lows? They're just not as stable as we are. I've had clients come back from Hong Kong and they've told me, like, when there's a lot of changes happening there, half the people leaving are either that are coming to Canada, and of those coming to Canada, half will go to Vancouver or Toronto. We literally have people who show our properties and they've come from Vancouver. So they're moving over and they're choosing, do we want to live in Vancouver? Do we want to live in Toronto? And they'll shop between the two cities. Right? So I think it makes sense for us in the GTA area to perhaps show a graphic like that, that talks about the two different pockets, not even national, but these two different markets that are swing markets and that attract different buyers. So look at your national statistics, compare them to your area. Convey on average how the market is compared to other spots. Even within there, you can have a little bit of fun with that and get a little bit local. Like, there can be a difference between Toronto and 905. We see that on our market watch a lot. But how do you bring that forward to people? Right? So you could do it like a 3-tier: Toronto, GTA, Canada in general. Right? So you can have fun with this on your number of properties you're showing. This is going to show up in a couple different spots here, but tracking your activities, and that will help your sellers understand when it's time to sell or not. Okay. So this is where you can put your statistics. You can see, I just want to highlight this for you on all of these graphics at the bottom. What this dark bar is this is your call to action. This is your click through, bringing you somewhere. So on all the ones we've looked at, and here's the consistency of it. They're always at the bottom. They're always kind of formatted in a similar way, right? We're being trained like Pavlov's dog to look for it. Where do I go? How do I click through? Where's that number going to be? Okay. The next is the teaser. Right, so this is an interesting one. So you're going to use a property that's under contract, and maybe it's sold in 4 days, 5 days. Right, so it's a listing that you have. So we're kind of mixing this together. It's a listing that you have. What were your days on the market? What were the multiple offers? What were the number of showings? What are we not going to put there? How to, right? But what's not going to be there? Sale price. So if you see the listing there, and this is a market update, remember there's a difference between, and there's a lag between what we see in the articles that we read and that our consumers and our clients read, and what we know is happening on the ground. So when you're an active realtor, you could have figured out somewhere around the second week of January, things started to change completely, right? And we could feel it. All of a sudden, there's 40 offers on this property? Are you kidding me? This is what started to happen end of January, beginning of February. So when we think about sending something out, if you're the realtor, okay, who had that property listed, and you don't even have to be the realtor who had the property listed, you still know the number of offers that were there. You can just do an illustration. But can you talk about the number of showings? Can you talk about what's going on? Can you let them know what's happening with your boots on the ground that they're not reading in the articles yet, and then leave something that's missing that they need to come to you to close the loop off in the future? What do they want to know? The sale price. They want to know what happened. Did it sell? How are you going to close that off? Tell them the story. Okay, so this is where we talk about it, and we use this a lot in our scripting conversations. This is social evidence, right? Social proof. Right, so there's different ways of looking at statistics. So one way to look at statistics is that you might look at the statistics and say only 3,000 properties sold in this month. And the same time in the prior year, 3,500 properties sold in that month. So, you know, sales have gone down. It's a weaker market. That's the eyeball catcher that you're going to get on your articles. Just think about the conversation though. 3,000 people thought it was a good decision to buy or sell real estate this month. That's social proof that 3,000 people thought it was okay. So when you tell a story like this again just becomes social proof of what other people were doing. Well, this other person thought it was an okay idea to list the property, and they ended up with, you know, 120 showings, 40 offers, and they sold that. Oh, I have to call you. Right, but it's social proof, it's social evidence. Okay, so if other purchasers are willing to purchase, perhaps I should too. If other sellers made a decision to sell, and this was kind of the story that they're getting in the results, so that's not you telling them to sell. That is telling them the story about what someone else decided to do, and then they can think whether it's a good idea and learn about whether that is or not a good idea by having you support them with information. Now, you can do a contract story and a year-to-date market update combined. Okay, so this is where you're using one of your listings to tell a bigger story. Okay, and this is an interesting dynamic. So this is where you can use general education to position yourself as the economist of choice. Right, so it's right here. You can't read it, but I've kind of extracted it for you here. What it says is after the first month on the market, stats show that your sale price goes down by 6%. So can we use a particular situation where we've got two properties, maybe one that you listed that sold in the first month? Okay, you know, you got to go what the stats say. Did that sell at 99%? I mean, depending on the pricing strategy, it could be 103% to average in the first month that we see things sell. And then tell them what happens to pricing when you stay on the market for a little bit longer. Can you grab their attention with a contract story and year-to-date market updates at the same time? Remember what you're doing here, right? So when we take a listing, what's one of the most common things that we end up talking about? What's the most common thing that we'll talk about that maybe the sellers don't agree with us on? Not your commission. What's the other thing?
Length of time?
Everyone's there. Length of time is a good one. Like how long is it going to take to sell? What's the other one? Price. You're auditioning right now. You're setting the pattern for the conversation as to after you decide that you want to interview me to earn the opportunity to represent you, you're setting the pattern here for your conversation around price. Well, I'm happy to consider listing at that price. I just want us to be on the same page that when properties stay on the market for longer than a month, they generally will sell at a reduced value of 6% per month after that. Are you okay with that? Right, so we're setting up the pattern in the conversation right now. Now, again, a contract story, and you can do a year-over-year comparison. So, have you ever seen a property that's sold like, you know, 3-4 times in the last 10 years? Yeah, it exists all the time, right? Most people would transaction real estate somewhere between 3 to 7 years. It could so happen that that's the 3 to 7 years in that one particular property. So you don't have to have been the listing realtor each of the 3 times necessarily, but you can tell the story around that, provide the general stats, utilize the address to support the activity. So, you know, the property sold for the first time in 1998, then it sold again in 2008, and then it sold again in what year? What were our sale price increases? I can tell you now, no matter where we look, okay, the numbers are going to be pretty good. There's a period in time where I could talk to people, and this is just before the most recent, like, kind of turbulence of the market, where they told me that they bought their property about 10 or 12 years ago. So people who bought kind of 2011, 2012, 2010, you could almost off the cuff figure out what their sale price would be today. So someone who had bought, like it's crazy, it was only 10 years, but it was an interesting run. Someone who bought like about $1 million in 2010, 2011, back about a year or so ago, you could almost within $100,000 be like, yeah, you're probably worth 1.8 to 2 million right now. Because the numbers were it was such a consistent pattern. But can you take a property that's sold on a consistent basis over that time period, even if it's just 3 years apart, or sometimes it might even be less. There's a quick turnover, and in 1 year, someone made, $200,000, $300,000. What does the story look like? You can easily illustrate it from a graphic perspective, but again, what does it mean for you? So when we think about properties are selling over and over again over time, and we're looking at different prices, they say, well, what does that mean for you as a seller? Right? So another one that we can take a look at is, again, increased property value over time, is the progression of properties listings sold multiple times of the story. So sorry, this is the same one going over. And so let's go over to this one. Okay, so here, so actually I want to go back. I didn't bring you to the attention of something. So this was the end of our language of real estate. Okay, so where we were over here, we were talking about national statistics to local statistics. This is where we entered. So it's kind of like, we have the 15 different buckets that we talked about for the listing side of things, or types of buckets. You have it kind of grouped into bigger things over here, where you have your language of real estate, and then you have your anecdotal. So this is where we're bringing in. So a lot of people think statistics are just going to look at market watch. So just mindset wise, I want you to think anecdotal as well. So I kind of blew right through that into the anecdotal section and just started telling you about them, but they're kind of two different categories. One is looking at the statistics that you get from your language of real estate, and the other is looking at different stories. What anecdotes can you tell? Right? So this is where we got into the teaser. This is what happened with this situation. This is where we got into our contract story year to date, right? This is like what happens there. This is where we get anecdotal year-over-year comparisons. Okay. The other thing that you can look at is we can take a look at our market update. Use less often tracked stats. We all get market watch. Okay, it's all there for us, but everyone's going to be utilizing those stats on a consistent basis. One of the things that we also all have access to, and I'm not the person to show you this, but you can play with your Broker Bay as well. And it'll track number of showings. It'll kind of walk you through those things. A lot of times, like what would showings be for a seller or a buyer? What type of indicator would it be? A leading or a lagging indicator? To tell you the story of what's about to happen. So we know that there's lots of showings happening. What's about to occur after that? Offers. Right? So showings can be a leading indicator. So this is when we feel it in a certain month, when the market maybe hasn't been, at the same pace. So right now, let's see, I mean, depends on, I guess, what market you're in. But how does everyone feel about the last 2 weeks when it comes to number of showings? What is it indicating is happening with the market? I know some of you have a good number of listings in the room. What's the last few weeks kind of mean to you? Softening. Okay, so anyone who's active on the listing side has seen the number of showings start to decline a little bit. And so right away, we're going to be able to tell you that the market's already starting to soften. So this uptick that happened from end of January, and end of January, we could feel it because we saw the number of showings. I remember talking to people and I was like, market shifted. And this wasn't even tracking it on Broker Bay. This was just me showing up at a property and I was like, there's someone in the driveway. And then I went inside and there were 2 people plus us. And then by the time I left, there was someone new coming in. So in like a 15-minute window, all of a sudden there was 5 people and I was like, haven't had that happen in a while, right? So that's anecdotal evidence, which you could completely use in a situation like this and tie that to market update. But look, I like numbers. So can you find that evidence on Broker Bay? For sure, we'll be able to find that evidence on Broker Bay. Actually, so that's the one that had 40 offers. Ironically enough, it's not the one that sold for the most money when we really saw the shift. But if we had checked on Broker Bay and looked at the number of showings that were occurring there, it was probably pretty aggressive at that time. People came out to play again. And if we start to take a look right now, we might be able to see that showings are going down. So what we're talking about is just, what David's feeling, on his particular listings, what I'm feeling on mine right now in terms of that slowdown, use stats. I bet you'll find it there. Okay, so what stats can you use that aren't usually shown? So when we think about going from a market, like market shifts that end up happening. So a market that's pretty aggressive, what do we not see happen? So when you offer in a property and there's a lot of offers, what do we don't have in our offers? Conditions. So can you take a look in a particular pocket and start to be able to track how many properties are going sold conditional on a consistent basis or not? So if we see properties going sold conditional instead of going straight to sold, what does that mean? It's shifting. Vice versa, when we see properties that are going straight to sold and no more sold conditional, all of a sudden it's getting more aggressive and there's more pressure on buyers to just simply capture the property. How many times have you seen a market update that talks about the number of properties that are reported sold conditional at a certain point in time versus another point in time? How many times have you seen a market update that talks about the number of showings that have been occurring, your leading indicator as to what your results are going to be in terms of offers and sale prices? These are the things that we kind of want to take a look and be able to do. One of the other ways that you can do that. I love your ringtones.
You should hear my wife's.
One of the parents from my daughter's soccer team, his ringtone only for his wife is from Star Wars, and it's the Death March.
Mine is warning, warning, it's your wife.
That's nice. So you can have fun with this stuff. So here's a roundup when you can take a look, like there's a lot of strength in numbers when we take a look at it. So you look at your own properties, the pending, they're closed during a certain time, and you can display them visually. Okay. Look internally at what has been done. Give you perspective about you and your team and their activity. So this is going to depend on how active you are and your team is, whether you have enough to do this. But you could also gross it up to the brokerage level. Right? So what are we seeing from a brokerage perspective in terms of activity level? How many properties have been listed in the last little while? Michelle has all those numbers. Right? So she'll tell us when we go through our leadership calls, okay, we've seen a whole bunch of listings. We've got a whole bunch going under contract. We can also see when listings are down. We can also just kind of follow those trends. Those numbers exist. You can use them. Right? So if you're going to send out a March newsletter, what happened in the first 2 months? What did you do in the first 2 months of the year? Did we find, like, January and February are generally slower months? Did you sell 6 properties? That's not a usual year. Why would that have happened? Why is that important to you as a buyer? Why is that important to you as a seller? Can you put that in there? So remember, these little things that you can add into there that you relate back to yourself, to your brokerage, the anecdotal, this is where you're starting to deviate a little bit from the language of real estate, but it maybe captures people's attention a little bit more. Here's the thing. Your average sale price from February 2024 versus February 2023, everyone's going to have that number and everyone's going to utilize that number. The anecdote that you can tell about a property that you had listed, that you listed at market value, but still held on offers, and then sold above market value because you had not 40 offers, but 7, and this time all out of the 7, all of them were really good offers. That's a story that you can tell. Can you use the anecdote to get people's attention on the market update? Multiple offer story, I just went through that. You know, what did it look like? What was the period of time? Share the number of offers that came in. This is the word trajectory. Okay, this is language is important. Real estate, a lot of it is about what we say, when we say, and how we say it. Okay, so sentences like, I think this is what's going to happen. Please don't utilize that. It's just the way we want to present it, right? It is expected based on X, Y, Z that this is what the outcome would be. Right? Expected and think are 2 very different words. It has to be based on something, and it's your interpretation of it. There's no right or wrong really way of looking at it. I mean, there should be a reasonable assumptions that you're using. Okay, it shouldn't be because, you know, your 2-year-old told you that the market's going to go up. Although good for them, I'm sure they know better than everyone else because it's a bit of a guessing game right now. But can you do it that way? Can you put that in there? Can you consistently have those, right? So 23 sellers received multiple offers in their home in the last month. Can you say that? So if you're going to track, you're going to geofarm an area, you should be able to track that. If you're going to truly try and add value to your readership, you can track that. So if you're going after Heritage Estates, you're going after Mill Pond, you're going after whatever that neighborhood is, can you look and track like how many people are holding on offers? They're going to sell. All you got to do is phone the brokerage. It's a legal requirement to tell you how many offers there are on the night of. So you're probably just going to have to set a reminder on your phone to call. And then you get to say that in the neighborhood last month, this many properties had multiple offers. The average number of offers registered was ABC. Sorry, 1, 2, 3. We'll go with numbers instead of offers. Does that make sense? Is that different? Right? So all we're trying to do is capture these things. Okay. So what you've seen in a lot of these is there's videos. So you'll see the video, notice Mary Cheatham King, it's her face there a lot of the time. Sometimes, you know, when we went through the court, she's like, I'll do the market update for my car. She's like, use your cell phone. Like, it doesn't have to be big professional, you at a desk like a newscast. Hey everybody, I'm just waiting for clients to show up for an appointment. Wanted to give you a quick market update as to what's happening today. That's the video that you attach there. Okay, so you're using your phone, you're showing your face. It doesn't have to be you at a news desk giving a market update. And so some of the hacks that were communicated was create some time blocks in your calendar on a weekly, bi-weekly, monthly basis. Okay. One's to determine the stat that you want to do and the story that of the market you're going to tell, and then the other is to actually film it. And so if you just have, this is the stat I'm going to use, most of you can look at the stat and say, this is a story I can tell around the stat. We could each choose a different stat from the market update and come up with a different video. Right? And what story you want to tell. Depends who you're trying to capture in that audience. Choose a name for your market update video so it creates a streamlined campaign. So there's going to be a name that's going to go there underneath the video. Right? So what you want to then do in terms of that is that you're going to have a couple, this is leveraging your different medias. And so this is, I'm just repeating to you what they're talking about because this is something I definitely haven't executed before. Okay. Is that what we want to do is the day before you send your email, contain your market update, they use a program called StreamYard, okay, to live stream on your social media platform. So you're going to live stream the video the day before it goes out. So this is where you focus on your email, but you get to use it in different spots. Okay, it goes into the email and you can say, did you miss the live stream yesterday? Okay. So StreamYard, you're going to take the video and then it's going to live stream at a different point in time, live stream. Okay. The time live for the video, the best times to do it is either 6 a.m. or 8 p.m. because that's the best chance of people watching it. That's been a pretty long history of that stuff. Even when they talked about like posting on LinkedIn back in the day, when that was a way to grab a lot of people's attention, LinkedIn is still a good tool to utilize. It was always about the morning and the evenings, because that's when people sit down and they have the ability to look at it, as opposed to the middle of the day when they should be working or probably working. Okay. Text out the video to your pipeline. So can you take that video that you make for your email and then put it in your app and just text it out to everyone too? So they just automatically get in their phones a quick 30-second video of your market update. There's just different ways where you can utilize this stuff for your own advantage. So when we step back and we start to take a look at what's next, what we've gone through thus far in this series is we've gone through the formula, the 15 ways to present your listing buckets, and we've gotten to the market update bucket. Now take a look at the content and how heavy it is. The ideal goal would be if we can put the community bucket and the personal and team bucket into one bucket, or sorry, one presentation, and then have it as a 3-part series. If not, it'll probably go into 4. I know the personal and team bucket can easily be combined with the tracking. Community bucket may be a little bit too big, but we'll try and expedite it. So this is supposed to make it easier for you. This is brain calories, right? It's both ways. Brain calories for your reader, so it's nice and easy for them. They just look at the appetizer, they click on what they want, they go straight to the meal. Okay. It's brain calories for you because you're not having to restructure your email every single month. It's a simple platform. You're gonna have a few graphics that you use consistently, and then you're gonna have the way you do your listings and the way you do your market update, and then we'll go over the way that you can do your other two buckets as well. Any questions around this and what that looks like?
So, like what we just talked about, like there's many ways to post it. Sorry, many different messages, for example, like contract story or like multiple offers like that. So in the email, basically you would first, like we talked about last time, is you would have your listing bucket, would pick one of those.
Yeah.
And then so all these here, we would just pick
One.
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 Just one, and then each month that you pick it, it's just one.
Yep. So when we see these graphics on the side, okay, and they're attached to a different version of the bucket, you're not putting like 4 different market update buckets there because you want to talk about 4 different stats. You're going to pick one stat, use one bucket, and then that can bring them to your landing page where you have a blog that you can talk about a whole bunch of different things. Okay, but we want to keep in your email it nice and simple, and you're just going to have one of those things there. So you're going to pick your one stat, you're going to tell your story around that stat, you're going to have one graphic. From there, they click and they go to your website. And they can get the full top to bottom analysis of what you do. Make sense? So if you think about the same thing on the listing, we talked about the 15 different ways. You're not putting 15 different listings up. And just, by the way, some of the illustrations of the 15 different ways to show a listing was showing multiple listings at one time. Okay, so it's not limited, you're not limited to just the one property. There's versions of showing more than one listing. Right, one that I thought was fun was like, which living room would you want to spend your, or family room do you want to spend watching the Super Bowl in? And they just had pictures of like different really nice family rooms that they had. And then you click on that and you would go to their listing page that had all the properties. This is here. They then leveraged that, for example, into a poll on Instagram. Right, so you can see how your email becomes your conduit to create the content in hopefully a systemized and consistent way that then gets leveraged through your other mediums as well. Cool? So, real estate is simple, not necessarily easy, right? So we've talked about this before. So when we talk about, real estate and the things that we do, I completely have to have respect for all the doctors and, all those professions out there, but what we do is not brain surgery. It is relatively simple, but it's not easy in that you have to find different ways to creatively display the information to capture people's attention, and you have to consistently work at it, which isn't easy. I've been saying to a lot of you over the last little while, it's how effective are we at doing the boring on a consistent basis over time? What habits can we build that allows us to do the boring on a consistent basis over time for the exciting to then show up? Okay? It's not easy to do the boring over and over. There's different ways that, we build habits around doing that, but the excitement does eventually show up, right? Your client phoning you and saying, it's time to meet with Alberta. We want to list the property and be sold by the end of the month. Okay? You have to figure out how that's going to happen. Right? That's the exciting part. But the boring part is making sure you send them the email the way you want for the 3 years prior, making sure you phone them quarterly each year. That's kind of the boring part. And they unsubscribe. If they unsubscribe, they've told you they don't want to talk to you, but then, you got to look at it and say, why wasn't I providing them enough value to want to keep reading my email? Right? And that's just a method that I think I kind of look at on a consistent basis too, right? So when we have people that we partner with, if we decide to partner with them, we talk about this as we're growing our teams in the team series that we're doing right now. Have you built your bubble, your world big enough that someone can accomplish all their goals within it? So if someone's leaving your team, okay, and it's because they're staying in the industry and they're trying to do greater things, well, that's probably a function that you didn't create a world that was big enough for them to accomplish their goals or give them enough value. Same thing, if someone's going to unsubscribe from my email, they're unsubscribing from my email because they've got 10 of them. And mine isn't the one that provides them the most value. So that's on me, not on them necessarily. Right? right? Or their sister-in-law got the real estate license and they're not allowed to talk to me anymore. Who knows? You gotta take everything with a grain of salt, right? Okay, so coming up, what is coming up? Well, that's tomorrow. Okay, so tomorrow what we're going to go over for those of you part of the brokerage, hybrid, we're in person and we're online, so you guys can choose. But we're just going to talk about actually how do we generate the leads and then more particularly conversion, all right? So I feel that in our industry, there's just so much attention to generating leads. And I don't want to undermine the importance of generating leads, but there just should be an equal amount of attention to converting leads. Okay, so we want to spend some time on that, okay? Next, we're going to go over next week. Saraf will bring you through, and that's open to everybody in person. I think that'll be on the Wednesday, going over winning listings by creating CMAs in Realm. Okay, that's consistently, we're doing it over and over again because Realm is evolving like every week, every day, kind of changing the way they do things. And so we want people to kind of start to get comfortable with it. You can tell they kicked out the implementation date because they realized they weren't quite there yet. But the more we do now, the better it will be. You don't want to be in a situation where you can't provide your client with knowledge because you're like me and you're a dinosaur and you refuse to leave Stratus. So I'm using Realm and I've been playing around with doing CMAs in Realm. It's not quite there for me to transition, but I'm hoping to get there shortly. Okay. And then what we'll go over is the conversation. I guess that's on the Thursday. There's always this question, and it's, I guess it's good. We just had our market update bucket, but our stats have come out. So everyone now, between now and probably Wednesday of next week, will get an email from, the many realtors that they have in their database. I get tons of emails from realtors all the time with their market updates. It's great. It's like, oh, content. Let me see how you did it. Okay. So we know everyone's going to get all these emails from realtors. Now, the question is that when you're in conversation with someone, hopefully you're doing database calls or reaching out to your database, or you're returning Facebook lead calls, at some point someone says to you, well, how's the market? How we answer that question can severely separate ourselves from how someone else answers that question. Okay, so your results from a how's the market conversation can distinguish you as, are you going to be the economist of choice for them on real estate, or are they just getting the same information that they could read themselves? So we really take a deep dive on the different ways that you can have that conversation to produce better results. So I can guarantee you, I guess you guys have figured out, my kids play a lot of soccer. Okay, in both of their soccer clubs, and they belong to different soccer clubs. Guess what? There's other realtors who are parents. Shocking news, right? Everywhere we go, there's other realtors who are parents. You take your kids to school. You go to the gym. You go to the gym, you're probably surrounded by realtors. Okay. My sister goes to the gym. I'm like, where did you meet this person from? She's like, oh, I met him at the gym, and they're realtors, right? So now you're at the gym, you're on the sidelines, okay, at a soccer game, you're picking up your kids from school. There's all these other realtors there too. When that question comes of how is the market, the way you answer that decides whether that when they're going to call someone to sell or buy their home, is it going to be you or is it going to be the other realtor that they had the conversation? So I think this is a really important conversation to be able to have, because just like our emails, just like what we're doing right here, that conversation is your audition. And how you respond to that is important. It's not on here, but for those of you who are already with us, on the Friday, so I guess the 15th, it would be, I'm doing my listing presentation for everyone in the office. So you guys get to be the sellers. We will do it online as well. So if you can't make it in, we'll do it online. And you guys get to be difficult sellers while I make my way through the listing presentation. David didn't believe me once. He's like, I want to come to a real one. I was like, okay, come to a real one. We left, and in the driveway, he's like, it's the exact same as what you did in the office. I'm like, yeah, it's the exact same as what I did.
You guys should come earlier. I use that presentation now. It makes a huge difference. So I didn't have one before. I guess I use one just very shortly. And right now, I've shared before, like my hit rate last year, my success rate is about 70% when I do the listing presentation. So I'll top 10 listings, I'll send 7 of that.
Yeah. And that's really high because that's because of the skill that David's bringing to the presentation. Because a lot of David's listings presentations aren't necessarily with people that he already knew. Whereas a lot of mine will be with people that I know. Right? So the other day we did a listing presentation and I was with another realtor from KW. And I don't think we're going to list because they're about $1 million or so off on where they think it's worth and where we believe it is. And I think they're pragmatic to get it. But there was a point in the listing presentation where I said we won. And I was chatting with the realtor outside and she goes, yeah, I know. Because there was a point where we realized that even though we didn't align on numbers, you could tell that we're the ones they're going to win. Yeah. It's supposed to be in person. Oh, upstairs. She should come downstairs. Yeah. Sound good? So that's where we are. That's what we're up to. You can go to our Instagram and just get our full training calendar. Where you go? Everybody.
Thank you so much.
No worries.
Thank you.
Hope you enjoyed.